Okay, great. I am Stephanie Eastman, and I host a class called Healing Through Christ. And we hold this class every Wednesday. It's free here on Zoom. During this class, we work to free ourselves from potentially harmful codependent behaviors. We do that by using the 12 steps and meeting together and gleaning from each other's experience, strength, and hope. And so today's a little bit different. I'm not going to be facilitating today. Well, I might be facilitating, but the guest presenter that we have is Roger Allen, and I'm really excited to introduce him. I'm going to wait until after we say the prayer. For any of you who would like to join our class in the future, you can drop your email in the chat here, and I can put you on our email distribution, and you'll get the link and our topics and the handouts that I'll be sharing that day. And so we just want everyone to feel welcome joining us. It's a great way to work your own what we call recovery, but I also say that everyone needs recovery, and it's been such a blessing in my life, and I'm so happy to share my recovery with other people because I know that recovery is, we always think of it in the terms of those with addictions, but codependency is in and of itself also an addiction. And so it's great to be able to share this with a group of people who are trying to work on themselves. So please feel free to add your information there. I am going to ask our friend Joan, who's on the call right now, to give us an opening prayer, and then I'll take a minute to introduce Roger.
Awesome. Thank you, Stephanie.
Hey, Joan.
Our dear Heavenly Father, we are so grateful to be here in this meeting today. I'm just super excited to hear Roger speak and share, and just ask that will bless him um, as he shares, and ask that will bless our minds and our hearts, that they can be open to learning new things, that we can be aware of what thou is bringing into our awareness. We're so thankful for recovery, um, for the tools that we're learning, for the changes that we're feeling as we work our 12-step program. So we're just grateful to be alive today and to be here, Father, in this sacred space as we learn. And we love thee so much and thank thee, Father. And we say these things humbly in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. I always appreciate the people who give the prayers. Okay, so let me take a minute to introduce our speaker here. I am super thrilled to have Roger back again. Roger spoke with us several months ago. Sounds like we might have somebody who's not muted. If you're not muted, if you wouldn't mind, there we go. Um, what- uh, Roger speaks at Education Week, and my husband and I attend Education Week every year. I've heard Roger for years. He spoke to us several months ago in this class. I don't even know how long ago it was. I'm thinking it wasn't quite a year ago, but and you had taken a sabbatical from teaching for a little while at Education Week, and I've always enjoyed his presentations. One of the things I can tell you about Roger's style of teaching is that he gets laser clear on things. I noticed when I would go to his classes, he would say so much that applied to the things that I was struggling with, which earlier on I didn't know it was codependency. But as I've heard him share these principles like he's going to be sharing today, I think you're going to find that he's going to give some clarity to some things that you might have been experiencing, or as he shares his things, you're going to say, oh my goodness, I never recognized it. That's such a simple way to put it. So I'm super, super grateful for that. Roger's one of the presenters who presents many times at Education Week. It's not just one speaker, one time that he speaks. So I don't know how many classes you gave this time. Was it three?
Yeah, three series.
Three series.
Yeah.
Okay. So this was one of the classes from one of the series, and I really could have chosen from so many that he gives. And the good news is he has some of his presentations and many more on his website. It's a very modest cost to be able to glean from his recorded presentations. But today we'll give you a taste of some of the things that he can offer. Let me tell you a little bit about him. He has a PhD in counseling psychology. He's an author, a content creator, a speaker in personal development and relationships. He co-founded the Human Development Institute, where he did individual and marriage and family therapy. But I think he's best known for his in-depth programs that really have life-changing effects on people who have participated in them and applied the principles. You can find these on his website. He also has a YouTube channel, which I think is great. That's a great place to get some free information from Roger. Um, I'll send that out when I send out the email with our recording of today. Let me give you a little more background, though. He does organizational behavior, management consulting, leadership development, and all of these led him to co-found the Center for Leadership. Is it organizational?
Organizational design.
Okay,
Yeah.
organizational design. And if I understand right, this was to help leaders help the people that they led be able to perform at their highest and their best and to empower them to be their best. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. And so really, even though that's more of a business model, that's what we're trying to do in this class. We're trying to show up in a way that we can inspire those around us and give them permission and a fertile place for them to be their best. And we do that in many different ways, but this is right along the same lines, but we apply it more to our families. He has so many valuable products. I didn't know about some of these, but he has one called the Hero's Choice, leading from the inside out. That's recovery right there. Raising responsible, emotionally mature children, which I wish I would have known about when I was raising my kids. Master yourself, self-defeating emotions. That's something that we work at in this class. Claiming your power to lead a happy and abundant life. He does them on marriage. He does them on managing stress. And when I thought about the managing the stress, what you're learning to do is you're learning to be emotionally honest and to be able to build strength into your relationships by the way you show up in them. And the trust factor, I'm sure there's many, many more. But I have to tell you honestly, his presentations at Education Week have been life-changing for me. I've had notes that I've used over and over and over. And so today, I hope that you have a pen and some paper so that you can record the things that the Spirit teaches to you. That's the real teacher here. A great presenter can bring things to the front of our mind, but then the Spirit teaches how it applies to us. If you did not yet print out the handouts that we sent, I'm just going to let you know we are going to be going over these today, and it will be very helpful for you to have them in front of you. So, with that being said, I'm going to turn the time over to Roger.
Well, thank you, Stephanie. Thank you for the kind words. And I'm pleased to be with you. I think it was in May
Okay.
earlier this year that I spoke about. I'm trying to remember exactly the topic. I know it was on codependency
Yes.
specifically, but it was good to be with you then. I'm happy to be back and with you again today to talk about 4 stages of adult development. And I'll begin by sharing that there are a lot of theories of adult development. There are theories of cognitive development, moral development. You may know the name Lawrence Kohlberg, ego development, Jane Levenger, Piaget. You've probably heard of Piaget and his stages of development of children, childhood, cognitive development. And although they differ somewhat in substance and complexity, all of these different themes converge on some common themes. And so, what I'm going to be doing today is talking about a relatively simple 4 stage theory of adult emotional development that captures many of these themes. And this is something that we've taught, particularly at the Human Development Institute, both the Human Development Institute, also the Center for Organizational Design, as I've done training with businesses, we have used this model as well. I became interested in developmental psychology as a graduate student at the University of Minnesota. And in fact, my dissertation was on developmental theory. I tested whether the level of counselor development, my hypothesis was if a counselor is at a higher level of personal development, cognitive development, ego development, moral development, whatever, if they're at a higher level of development, it's going to be correlated with counseling outcomes. Those therapists who are at higher levels of development will be able to produce different outcomes in the counseling or therapy process. So My interest goes back to those days, and ever since that time, I've continued to follow and have some interest in developmental theory. And then at the Human Development Institute, which I co-founded actually with my father many, many years ago. He's since passed on, but we have taught this theory many times. So I think of the four stages that I'll be talking about as four paradigms. And each of these paradigms represents a qualitatively different way of viewing the world. And when I say that, and I did think about having, because I've got slides and I decided rather than trying to go back, because I like to be able to see you, want you to be able to see me so that we can make it a little bit more interactive. So I've decided not to use slides. So I'll talk you through some of the concepts. And then, of course, we have the handout. But each of the paradigms represents a qualitatively different way of viewing the world. Each paradigm organizes our experience, and by that, I mean how we view the world, the meaning we give events, our motives, our attitudes, our self-esteem, our beliefs, how we handle our feelings, our relationship with others, each paradigm organizes all of those different dimensions of ourselves into a coherent framework. And this framework changes, or these themes change as we move from one stage of development or from one paradigm to the other. So you have them in front of you. You've probably taken a look at them, but there are four paradigms that we'll be talking about. And survival, let me do just a real quick overview. Survival is coming from fear, and it looks like this. It's just barely holding on. It's just holding on by, my fingernails. Security is coming from duty and conformity, and it looks like this. I'm seeking to feel safe. Success comes from a strong sense of self and achievement, and it looks like this. And serenity is coming from love and trust and goodwill, and it looks like this. Arms outstretched, opening myself to life. So my belief is that at any given time, we can be coming from fear, security, achievement, success, or serenity. And the question is, how do we move? How do we move from one stage of development to another? That's what we're going to be talking about today. Now, I want to share with you that circumstances in our lives matter. Circumstances make a difference. You're going to have different experiences of life if you grow up, let's say, in Gaza, as opposed to, Phoenix, Arizona. The different circumstances of our lives truly make a difference. And oftentimes, the circumstances that we're born into certainly bless us. But I want to say that just as important as our circumstances, perhaps even more important, is the paradigm through which we view those circumstances. In fact, you will experience the circumstances of your life and the events of your life differently based upon your paradigm. You can apply this to your job. You can apply it to your relationship with your boss, to the state of the world today, to a family challenge. Let's assume that have you ever been given a responsibility and your immediate reaction was, no, this is frightening. This is overwhelming. I'm not up to this. I can't do this. Well, at that moment, you're coming from survival. You're coming from fear. And, or you can accept that same responsibility from a sense of duty. I really want to do a good job here. I want to give the best that I can. Or you can accept that same responsibility from a sense of achievement. wow, I not only want to do a good job, I've got to be the best. Absolutely do this to the best. Or if you're coming from love, if you're coming from serenity, then it's more like this. My motive changes. Let me give you another example. And I used to teach, and I haven't taught this particular personal development class in many years, but many years ago, for many years, in fact, we taught a personal development class called Making Things Happen and did a lot of deep personal work with the participants in the course. But at the end of the course, and by the way, I made people who took the course promise that they wouldn't share this, so I'm kind of explaining something that is confidential, but I'm no longer doing the course. But anyway, at the end of the course, everybody got to sing a song, and they sang it a cappella in front of the entire group. And the song changed somewhat throughout the years. Sometimes it was the quest. This is my quest to follow that star. Or most often we use the song My Way. And now the end is near, and so I face the final curtain, my friend. Don't let me get, don't let me go off on it. That song has a lot of personal meaning to me because I've seen literally hundreds and thousands of people struggle with it. But something that I used to tell them before they sang the song, I would share with them, you can come from one of the four paradigms. This can be about fear and terror for you, and that's the experience that some of you are going to create. And that's okay. Or you can come from duty. And duty means I'm doing this only because I'm obligated, and Roger is telling me that I have to do this to graduate from the class. So it's coming from duty and it's coming from conformity and obligation. Or you can do it from achievement or success, which is, man, my ego's involved here. And I've got to do well. I've got to perform this and sing this better than anybody. And of course, for some people, that was an impossibility. For those people that had great voices, it was easy. But for some people, but that's another place to come from. And then I shared with them, but you can also come from love. And love means it's not about you. Love is how you show up. You're aware of the people around you. And the song and singing this song is a statement of how you want to show up in life and how you want to show up in the world and the connection that you want to make with other people. And so that simple song, I think, represents all four stages of development. I can sing from fear, I can sing from duty, I can sing from achievement and ego, but I can also sing from love and with an awareness of what is it that I want to create. Any of those places we can come from. Think about your relationship with your boss. I used to think about that, and then I realized, oh, I am my boss. Or you can think about the state of the world. We're going through a lot of chaos in the world today. Do you experience that chaos from fear, from survival? Do you experience that chaos from duty, from conformity, from safety, wanting to protect yourself? Do you experience it from achievement, identity, mastering, conquering? Or do you experience it from an openness and vulnerability and willingness to show up? Or a family challenge? You're all in relationships with family members who are struggling with addiction or mental illness. When you have a family challenge, somebody says something or does something that really feels quite threatening or outrageous to you, what I'm suggesting is we can experience that from fear. We can experience it from duty. We can experience it from achievement and ego and imposing our will on others, or we can learn to experience it from love. And I don't want to say that it's easy. I'm not saying it's like turning on a light switch to go from fear to love. It is not. It's a process of emotional development. It's a process, it's a lifetime journey. But that's the journey that I want to talk about as we continue today. So before, and by the way, any comments, any questions? I do want to make this somewhat interactive. So if somebody wants to raise a hand and okay,
You can raise your hand or you can put questions in the chat and I'll be checking that.
okay, great. Yeah, and then let me know, Stephanie, I'm sure you will. So let me offer a few qualifications, and you have these on your handout, but let me elaborate a little bit by making a few qualifications to help you understand. I think it will give you some context for processing, for understanding these four stages of development. Number one is that each successive stage is a state of higher emotional development. In other words, security is a higher stage of emotional development than is survival. Success is a stage of higher emotional development. Serenity is a stage of higher emotional development than success or security or survival. And by the way, I share with you that I'm talking about a 4-step model. This could be a 7-step model, an 8-step model, a 10-step model. You know, different theorists have different levels of development. And again, I shared with you to begin with that I've kind of collapsed these into what I think are four fairly useful paradigms, ways of understanding our development.
We've got a question from Tammy. Do you have?
Okay, Tammy?
Yes, I have a question. That is, I can see all these different motives, and obviously, love is the best one. And I would say in my life, I probably thought I was coming from love, but there was a lot of fear there. And so, how do we differentiate? And then sometimes, I think as well, it felt like, oh, if I do this, I'm being very loving, but I was throwing myself under the bus, so there wasn't the self-love. So then hard to give from that place of maybe it probably really was duty and love combined, right? It's okay to throw myself under the bus because this is the right thing to do, but
Be
um,
self-sacrificing for other people. We've been taught that that's what love is.
yes, but then somehow, as I progress, which I'm not there yet, um, if I'm able to really love myself, then the genuineness of that love that I can give will be probably in a better place instead of keep going back to duty or fear or so how do I reconcile that to where it's actual love instead of maybe more what I was taught looked like love?
Ooh, wow. There are a number of really good questions embedded in that comment and that question. And I think as we continue to go through the qualifications, I'll answer some of that. And as we talk about the different stages, but that is a really good question. And one thing I want to share with you is that people living at that serenity paradigm will feel fear. It doesn't mean we've overcome fear. The question is, what is our response to that fear? Because our response to the fear is going to be very different from the survival paradigm or the security paradigm, success or serenity paradigm. But when we live in serenity, we still experience fear. We still experience hurt. We still experience loneliness. But we have a broader sense of awareness and consciousness and more of a sense of self-responsibility. And so we're able to make better choices in the face of that fear. I'm able to make better and healthy choices. So I feel fear, but I act in a way that's going to be good for me, that's going to be taking care of who I am, my needs, with not to the detriment of other people. It's not, success is more of a me first kind of attitude, whereas love and serenity is no, it's us. This has to be good for me. It has to be good for you. But good for you doesn't necessarily mean that I do something that's easy for you. We sometimes think that if we're being protective, that love is being protective and taking care of other people's feelings. And it's not. Love may require making the strengthening choice to do and say something that leaves the full responsibility on another person for the choices that they're making and facing even the hard consequences that they need to face. In other words, I give up rescuing. I'm not going to rescue you. And that doesn't make me unloving. What it does is it allows you to be self-responsible. And that's a loving step. So love does what is strengthening, not always what feels good in the moment. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I get it, and I'm working at it, but yes, it doesn't come natural. Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't come natural to us because it's not how we're socialized. It's not how we've grown up. So let's keep working through this. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
though that that's a very good question, Tammy. Um, so each successive stage is a higher stage of emotional development. Growth means, and as I have thought, what exactly does it mean that we're growing from survival to security to success to serenity? Exactly what is changing inside of us? And I think, let me mention 5 themes that change as we grow. Number one, growth means that I become more conscious and aware. I'm expanding my awareness. Number two, it means that I'm becoming more self-responsible, less likely to blame, less likely to make justification and excuses, more likely to own my part and my choices in what's happening. Number three, a third theme, is that I become more accepting of reality. And by reality, I mean the events that are occurring day to day. I mean the circumstances of my life. I mean the nature of life. I mean more accepting of that person who's an addict, let's say a child in my life that I recognize is making some really harmful choices that have caused me such grief and pain and caused the family such grief and pain. I become more accepting of reality and more willing to allow and to let that be, let go of some unrealistic expectations about how I think the world ought to be or how other people ought to be, and more willing to embrace the way it is. A fourth theme of growth that helps us grow through these stages is my vision becomes more expansive. When I'm living in survival, I really don't have a vision. I'm just surviving. I'm just getting by day to day. When I'm living in security, I have a little bit of a vision, and it's being a good boy. It's being a good girl. When I get to a success, I begin to claim a vision for myself. I set goals. I make things happen. When I come to serenity, when it comes to serenity, I still have a vision, and that vision is much more expansive, but that vision has more to do with love and embracing life. So anyway, those are 5 ways in which we grow through these stages of development. As you are becoming more aware, as you're taking more responsibility for yourself, as you're more willing to embrace reality, as you expand your vision. And when I talk about expanding vision in serenity, I'm talking about vision that becomes more inclusive of other people. And as you're able to make positive choices, you're growing, you're moving through these stages. And by the way, this isn't necessarily a quick process, right? This is a lifetime process. So let me also make the qualification that there are not stark boundaries between the stages. And what I mean is that we transition into a higher stage gradually and over time. And so that may mean that you're straddling stages. You're leaving behind one particular stage. Let's suppose you're leaving behind the stage of security, moving into success, but you're straddling both of them. You're living some of security and you're living some of success. It takes a lot of life experiences to make the shift from one paradigm to another. And sometimes progress is really pretty abrupt and rapid, but most of the time it's not. Another qualification I want to make is we fluctuate between the stages. In other words, in different aspects of life, at different seasons of life, sometimes at different times during the day or even during the week, we're going to fluctuate. I'm going to find myself on my head upside down in survival. And yet I thought I was doing such a good job living from security or living from success. But I will say that we're bound by the highest stage we've achieved. For example, if you grew up in hardship and trauma, then survival might be all you know. And I know that there are many, many people around the world who live in survival because that's all they've known is, hardship, is trauma. If you live in security, then you know security and survival, and you'll vacillate between security and survival. If you've experienced success and stepped into that, paradigm of success, then all of those stages below are still available to you. We've internalized them. They've become part of who we are. So you'll still experience security and you'll still experience survival. When in serenity, it doesn't mean you've left success behind or security or survival. They're all available to you. But you're bound by the highest stage you've achieved. So if you've achieved security, you'll fluctuate between security and survival. If you've achieved success between security, survival, and success, we fluctuate downward, but not upward. Does that make sense? We grow upward. Another qualification, we grow upwards to the next paradigm as we fully internalize the lessons of the present paradigm and as our hearts, our souls are ready to experience life in a new way. It doesn't just happen. We have to desire to experience life in a new way. If I've been living in, let's say, security for a long time, and pretty soon I start to ask myself the question, is this all there is? Is there something more? And then how do I grow? I grow in awareness. I grow in self-responsibility. I grow in acceptance. I grow by expanding my vision. I grow in making better choices. So we have to be ready to move to a new level, and we have to fully internalize, really understand the lessons from our current state of growth. Jean Piaget talked about two dynamics that help explain our growth. And one is called assimilation. And assimilation is interpreting incoming information in the same way, in your current way of viewing the world. In other words, if you're living in fear, you interpret incoming information, even if somebody makes a very loving, kind gesture toward you. But if you're living in fear and you don't trust people, then you question their motives. We interpret information from the paradigm, interpret information from our current way of viewing the world. So that's assimilation. That keeps us in the paradigm that we're currently in. Piaget, and he was applying this to the development of children, by the way, the cognitive development of children. He talked about another concept that he called accommodation. An accommodation is interpreting information in a new and more complex way, which leads to growth from one stage of development to another. You start to see the world in a new way. You can't accommodate it in your previous stage. Not that you've left that previous stage behind. It's still available. It's still a part of who you are. But you begin to see also in a higher or in a more complex way. Do those concepts make sense? Jean, oh, what's her name? I'm sorry. The woman who is talking these days about fixed mindset and growth mindset. We could use the same concept that if you have a fixed mindset, you're going to continue to interpret life from the same paradigm. If you have a growth mindset, you're willing to be open to learn, to grow. Okay, another qualification I want to share with you, and I know I'm taking a while on these, but I really think they help us understand these stages of development and particularly how we move through the stages of development. And that is, there are valuable lessons in each of the paradigms, valuable lessons in every paradigm. In survival, we can learn a lot about humility, about vulnerability, about self-honesty, even about the importance of being open to support and love and asking for help. In security, we learn about the importance of obedience and duty and fitting in and how to contribute, how to be good citizens and how to contribute to society. In success, we learn about our power and authority to make things happen. We learn to trust ourselves. We learn to set goals, to go after things that we want that are important to us in life. In serenity, we learn a lot about trusting our lives to God, as well as expanding our ability to love life and all of God's children. So as we open ourselves to the lessons of a particular stage, and we learn those lessons, and our heart longs for something more, we're able to grow into a higher stage. But let me also say another qualification, there are payoffs that we get out of each stage. And those payoffs keep us from moving to a higher stage. Does that make sense? Those payoffs are like a little gravitational pull. They're like gravity that keep me stuck in survival or keep me stuck in security or in success. And I have to be willing to let go of those payoffs in order to move to a higher stage, in order to hear the call, because there is a call from a higher stage. The pull of survival is self-indulgence. It's the path of least resistance. It's just doing what feels good or easy at the moment. The pull of security is safety and belonging. It's outsourcing my thinking to other people. And I think we're so often guilty of this within religion, that we want other people to think for us and tell us what to believe. And we let other people become the source of what we think, our beliefs, our thoughts about ourselves, our thoughts about life. And we do so because we like the safety. We want to feel safe. We want to belong. The pull of success is ego gratification. It's status. It's acclaim. It's achievement. It's recognition. The call of serenity, the payoff of serenity is true peace, true love in life. So there are payoffs. I got to be willing to give up the payoffs of one stage to move to the next. The last qualification I want to make is that the stage that you're in at any given point in time does not define your worth. Your worth is a given. Your worth comes from God and not something that you have to earn or prove by living in a different state, in a different paradigm. It's understanding the divine relationship you have with God, with your maker, with your creator, with your higher power. So given those qualifications, let's move into the 4 stages. Anybody have any comments at this point? Comments, questions? Okay, let's move. Survival. I would say I've told you fear, anxiety are the defining characteristics of survival. I feel afraid. I feel anxious, if not outright afraid. We're overwhelmed by the circumstances and the challenges of life. But not only do I feel overwhelmed by life, in other words, I feel like, and by the way, I want to emphasize this. We all live here sometimes. We all live here. This is part of our human experience. We're not only overwhelmed by the challenges and circumstances of life. Here's the kicker. We feel powerless to do anything about it. Life feels bigger than me. We feel like a pawn or a victim of life. We're subject to the influences over which we perceive we have little control. Our awareness, particularly if survival is a chronic way of living, is limited. Our self-esteem tends to be low. We don't really like ourselves. We see ourselves making bad choices, and we have perhaps a lot of self-disdain. We don't like who we are. We don't like ourselves. We view most of life's tasks as unpleasant, In other words, I get up in the morning because I have to, not because I really want to. I'm looking forward to the day. I take on a challenge at work because I have to or because I'm afraid not to. My purpose becomes about surviving, just getting by. And we seek escape from the emotional pain of life, the anxiety of life through distractions, through mood altering experiences, oftentimes, or substances. But not just substances and mood altering substances or experiences, but even distractions. Some discomfort starts to come up in me, some anxiety starts to come up in me, and I immediately begin to scroll my phone because I don't want to feel what I'm feeling. Or I immediately go shopping, or I immediately go to social media, or I do something to distract myself because I don't like the anxiety or the hurt or the feelings, the emotions that I'm having. Our relationships when living, especially if it's chronic, when living in fear, anxiety, tend to be negative. They tend to be filled with drama. We respond to conflict by either some people get aggressive and fight, some people run and shut down emotionally, and other people ignore or distance. Sometimes we cope from an active mode. In other words, some people living in survival are aggressive, they're hostile, they're harsh. Or a lot of people become passive, withdrawn, closed, and defeated by life. But either way, we experience ourselves as not okay, and we experience life as painful. And so much emotional energy is required to cope with the stresses of life when we're in survival that we face a lot of anxiety related problems, ulcers, hypertension, insomnia, headaches, depression, even mental illness. For some, security is short term due to a crisis or negative turn of events. For other people, survival is a chronic way of life. Now, again, all of us at times are going to experience survival. I remember I was, well, I don't, I was given I was doing organization development design consulting a number of years ago, and somebody from a external consulting firm called me and said, Roger, I'd like you to take on this project. And I had about 3 days to prepare, and it was something I had never done. It was creating a shared services organization in a $10 billion company, working with senior management. And although I had done organizational redesign, never created, I'll tell you what, the anxiety that came up in me, ooh, it was big, and I had to deal with it. And so my initial reaction was I was in survival. I was governed by fear. I felt like a pawn. I have to do this. I was reactive and, seeking escape and so on. I'm not okay. It's a jungle. I can't, all of that, those themes until I really settled in and began to deal with it and think about what it was I needed to do, and then began to develop some confidence and moved into the success paradigm and actually, was able to go and be successful. But I was on my head, upside down in survival. How many of you experienced that in COVID? Initially when you learned about COVID? Or how many of you experienced that when a loved one you hear about, that telephone rings and you just wonder, you experience that fear and wonder, oh no, what does this mean? Or a loved one makes a really poor choice and it's easy for us to join them. There's a gravitational pull and it's easy for us to join them in their world of survival. So that's survival. All right, let's move on. And by the way, here's the transition out of survival. And there was a time many years ago when I thought it was develop more self-discipline. I don't believe that anymore. We can see that because it appears that people who are living in survival are lacking discipline. But there are two things that I think are really important in survival. Number one is help. Number one is knowing that there are loving people out there that want to help me, that there are places where I can go and get some help. There's a support system. I can trust others. I can depend on others. I can let other people be part of my network, which takes a lot of humility. And the second is to recognize I have choices. I have choices. So to move from survival to security, I have choices. I can make different choices. I may not always like the choices, but there are choices available. So anyway, any questions about any of these characteristics as you look at your page of survival, that paradigm? Does it make sense? Okay, let's move up to security. So in security, what is happening? Security, by the way, is where most of us spend most of our lives. The major theme is safety, comfort, and belonging. We want to belong, we want to feel safe, we want to be comfortable. We handle our basic anxiety by looking to others, particularly authority, to guide us, to tell us what to do and how to live. Outside trust. We trust outside authority more than trusting ourselves. We're dutiful, we're dependable. We really are good citizens. We want to do our share. We're basically honorable in our approach to life. Want to be good people, want to be good parents and workers. If I'm given a responsibility, I want to fulfill that responsibility well. I want to know where I fit in, where I belong. I want validation. I do want to know that other people like me and that other people approve of what I'm doing. And when I sense rejection, when I sense other people judging me or criticizing me, it can be pretty devastating on my self-esteem. My behavior is governed by shoulds and nots, oughts. I do what I do because I should, I ought, as taught by our culture or families of origin. We know what we're supposed to think, what we're supposed to feel, how we're supposed to act, and so on. Our self-esteem and awareness are moderate. We feel good about ourselves as we perceive others feel about us. In other words, I'm not the locus of control. I'm not the source of how I feel about myself. But how I feel about myself really depends so much on how I think other people perceive me and think about me. If we sense that we belong and that other people approve of us, we feel okay and good about ourselves. In this paradigm, we unconsciously subordinate our own needs and self-expression to what we think other people need or what we believe they expect of us. We may at times find ourselves changing what we think or how we act. We can be a little bit chameleon-like, depending on who we're with. And sometimes we may even find ourselves conforming to a negative standard or behavior if that's what other people around us are doing at the moment. Generally, in our relationships, we don't want to rock the boat. The message is, I won't upset things if you won't. If you won't hurt me or upset me, I won't upset or hurt you. We can be fairly dogmatic in our beliefs, and we can feel threatened by and even rejecting of people that we feel are different from us. Over time, we recognize that we're not living fully. There's got to be more to life. We're living more in security to avoid losing than to win, than to make life happen. Now, again, I shared with you, this is where a lot of us live. We're governed, conforming is the main theme, right? We're governed by duty, defer to external voices. We're dutiful, honorable. We seek comfort. My beliefs are I'm okay if people like me. I need to fit in. Don't rock the boat. Life is safe if I'm obedient. I'm dependent, conforming, obedient, predictable, consistent. I abdicate my own power. I live from let's keep the peace. So do these make sense? Any comments, any questions?
Sounds like a lot of codependency in that section right there, at least to me.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. A lot of codependency. Yeah, not trusting my own authority, not trusting other people. Let me even read this is just a story that I wrote recently. Emily was the kind of person everyone counted on, dependable, consistent, pleasant. She showed up at church on time, wrote thank you notes, made casseroles for new mothers, and chaired the PTA with a smile. People often told her, Emily, you're such a good person. And she lived for those words. They were her oxygen. As long as people approved of her, she felt safe. When she felt disapproval, real or imagined, Her stomach tightened. She never asked herself what she wanted. She asked instead, what am I supposed to want? What will keep everybody else happy with me? At home, she avoided conflict with her husband by smoothing over disagreements. She changed her tone, her opinions, her personality, depending on who she was with. Her self-esteem rose and fell on the shifting tide of other people's reactions. One day in a church meeting, a teacher asked, what do you feel called upon to do in your life? Well, her mind went blank. She didn't know. She hadn't known for years. And that night she knelt by her bed, unsettled. But in the stillness, she felt God whisper, not a reprimand, but an invitation. Emily, what do you think? What do you feel? I trust you. You're my daughter. The sentence shook her. I trust you. She realized she had never trusted herself. And this became her transition out of security, learning to hear her own authority, not just the echo of others. She didn't rebel. She didn't reject her values. She simply began asking a new question. What is true for me before anybody else approves? And with that new question, she began to grow. Let's move to success. Are you okay moving on? Okay, let's move to success.
I, I have a quick question.
Yes,
I love that what she got. What was it? What's true for me? What was it that she said to herself? Or that
she's, yes, yeah. What she said to herself was, hold on, what is true for me before anybody else approves? What is true for me?
and so what's the approach to get to that place?
And that's the work to move from security, where most of us live, into success. So, what is the work? The work is to start to trust your own authority. And by that, I mean that you have perceptions and you have thoughts and you have feelings and you have beliefs that are trustworthy. It doesn't mean discard what you have been taught to believe or taught to think or taught to feel. But it means that, see, my belief is God wants us to grow up. Doesn't want us just to remain children. He wants us to grow up. Well, what does it mean to grow up? One of the things it means is that we start thinking for ourselves. We start to trust ourselves. In other words, yeah, God wants us to obey. I mean, that's the first law of the gospel. By the way, it's not the highest law, it's the first law. God wants us to obey, but he also wants us to grow into our own sense of integrity. Not simply comply, not do what we do out of compliance and out of duty, but out of choice. And that's what we learn as we transition out of security. Yes, I start to think for myself. I often think more complexly. Things aren't quite as black and white as I've always believed. There's more complexity to life. There's more nuance to life. I begin to trust my own authority. When living from success, I'm more internally motivated to pursue and achieve. I'm not simply living a script that was given me by somebody else, which I'm doing when I live in security. I'm living somebody else's script. As I move into success, I start to write the script for myself. In other words, I begin to develop a vision. What does success mean? And then I begin to set goals and I begin to show some discipline and do the hard work to move toward that vision. I'm moving out of a dependent stance in life toward an independent and a proactive approach to life. I learned that I can get things done. I can make good things happen. You've heard there are three types of people. There are those who make things happen. There are those who watch what happens, security. And there are those who ask what happened, survival, right? I realize that I can make things happen. We meet life more head on. We conquer There's more of a conquering, more of a mastery, more of a taking advantage of its opportunities. That's why this, rather than this, becomes the major theme. And this is a good way to live. And it's an important stage of development because we're exercising our own agency to act and not be acted upon. We're learning about our power to make things happen. We're learning to trust our own intuition and authority. Lessons that I believe God wants us to learn. So if you look at achievement, and here we start looking at some of the limitations also, because achieving is what it's about, but we're also more governed by image and ego. I start to trust my own authority. I want to. In other words, I'm not just living from have to or from ought to, but it's want to. And it's okay for me to clarify my own vision and what is important to me. I become more proactive. I become more hardworking. I seek to stand out, whereas I seek safety and comfort in security. In success, I seek more to stand out, to go for it. However, my beliefs tend to be more ego-based. I'm okay if I'm successful, but notice how conditional it is. I'm okay if I'm successful. And if I'm not successful, then I don't feel okay. In other words, it's based in security, it's based on approval of other people. In success, it's based on performance. It's how well I do. I believe that more is better. If I tell myself I have to have so many likes on Facebook, more is better. If I have to have so much money, if I have to have so much status, more money, more of those social symbols of success, until we find ourselves on a treadmill in which however much I have, it's never enough. I'm living from scarcity rather than abundance. And life can feel like hard work because I'm always putting out and working so hard to earn my keep, to earn my place in society or before the eyes of God, whatever it might be. But notice how I've grown from dependence to independence. I'm watching out more for myself. It's okay for me to have needs and to advocate for myself and assert those needs with other people. And even with the people who are dependent upon me. And even the people that are addicts in my life, it becomes okay for me to take care of myself. I do think of people, oftentimes we get trapped in people are a means. In other words, are they helping me or are they hindering me from getting what I want? We judge our relationships based on fairness, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. We compete, we're very competitive in success, and we're very likely to compare ourselves and how we're doing with other people. We also prioritize our achievement over relationships. Life is about getting as much as I can, being more, better, and different. I hide my weaknesses. I don't want to show other people that I hide weaknesses. The caution of success is that ego can become front and center. We begin comparing how green our lawn is, our looks, and how beautiful we are, and how our kids are doing. We begin comparing and we begin measuring our worth against other people and the social symbols of success. How much money we make, the house we live in, our position or status in the community, our likes on social media, our popularity, our beauty. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with these per se. In fact, but I think it's important to our growth that we set goals and that some of those goals are related to having and doing. But it becomes too easy to live from more, better, and different and always having to prove myself. I can never be enough. We want to project a competent image. We want to be in control. And we're very uncomfortable being vulnerable and displaying signs of weakness. The outer has become more important than the inner, outer praise, popularity, and so on has become more important than the inner. And even in the spiritual realm, I think I have to be more spiritual and more righteous. And so I set myself up for toxic perfectionism. And we pay a high price in personal stress and self-criticism. And another caution, and I mentioned this, as we prioritize performance over people. Sure, I care about people, but especially when they help me get what I want. I may not appreciate them deeply or give them the time that they want from me. Our relationships tend to be more emotionally distant, partly because we don't want to be vulnerable, and partly because we're more concerned with achievement and productivity than with people. Does that make sense? Can you see that paradigm? And notice times
Thanks.
when you
So
may be living from that place? Yes.
I think all of these things are relatable. And I'm looking at security and success and noticing how both of those are what I would call approving energy. Either we're receiving evidence that we're okay from other people, or we're receiving evidence that we're okay. We're proving ourselves by what we do. And I love the question that Tammy asked about how do we get to a place to trust ourselves? And I look at security and success as far as trusting ourselves goes. There's something that we talk about in our class where we give ourselves permission to make mistakes. And it's more important
Yeah.
that we understand, hey, it's okay to make a mistake, but what's not okay if we're going to learn how to trust ourselves is to do what somebody else thinks is right. We do what we think is right, knowing it's okay to make a mistake.
Nice.
So just a little.
So that, in fact, that's the key to progression into serenity, and that is
Awesome.
accepting myself as imperfect. That's a huge part of it. That I don't have to be perfect. That I don't have the greenest lawn. I don't have to have the, most obedient children or whatever it might be. We start to give more grace. I want to speak to that in just a minute. Let me share a story from success. Um, David had always been a higher achiever. He worked hard, set goals, got things done. He paid off debt, advanced in his company, and built a reputation for competence. He liked this version of himself, capable, confident, in control. Success felt good. It gave him momentum and a sense of identity. He was building his life, shaping his future, proving himself. But slowly he started to notice the cracks. His teenage daughter told him, "Dad, you're always on your phone." His wife said, "I feel like your projects matter more than me." At work, his spirit was quietly empty despite his professional wins. And when a colleague was promoted ahead of him, the jealousy hit him much harder than it should have. Well, one evening he sat alone in his office staring at an award he had won 6 months earlier. He realized something. This trophy means nothing to me now. I'm just off chasing the next one. He wasn't living from vision anymore. He was living from comparison, from ego, from proving. And he felt tired, bone tired. And that night he prayed differently. Father, what do you want me to become? Not what do you want me to accomplish? And the answer came slowly over weeks. Be someone who loves people, not uses them. Be someone who notices beauty. Be someone at peace in his own skin. Well, he didn't give up achieving. Remember, I share with you that as we reach higher stages, higher paradigms, all of those previous stages are still incorporated. They're still inherent. They're still a part of who we are. He didn't stop achieving, but he began asking different questions. Is this coming from ego or from God? Is this choice helping me become whole, or is it just to look successful? And this shift, small but profound, began to turn his heart toward the fourth paradigm. So the transition from success to serenity is meeting life with grace. Meet life with grace. And it looks like this. In fact, let me just invite you all to do this. Just open your arms. In fact, the wider you can open them, the better. What does this imply? It's my willingness to befriend life. It's my willingness to trust life, to trust God rather than fear life, to open my arms to all of life, to events and circumstances, to my neighbor, to my fellow beings, and to myself. It's my willingness to meet all of life, with grace, and with charity. I want to share that in truth, life is made up of both joy and lamentation. The Old Testament uses that word, and I kind of grasp onto it. I like that word, lamentation. Serenity is my willingness to accept all of it. You know, my life is made up of so many different experiences, and some I would call good and some I would call bad. Some I'd call enriching and some deflating. In my life, there's kindness and meanness. One of the things that I used to do in that personal development class I told you about is I'd draw a big circle on a chalkboard, and then I'd say, now just share with me characteristics of life. And people would say selfish, and somebody else would say unselfish and beautiful and hard. And we would just fill up that board with words. And then I would ask the question, is there anything up here that you don't understand? And they'd say, no, we understand. Do you understand all these words because you've looked them up in the dictionary? No, we understand these words because we've experienced all of them. Life is kindness. Life is meanness. Life is good fortune. Life is bad fortune. Life is selfishness. Life is generosity. Life is bitter and sweet, and so on. In serenity, life isn't just a series of good times to latch onto or bad times to escape from, but it's a journey into love and wholeness in which we find joy and meaning in spite of circumstances that we don't control. Charity, grace, is welcoming the wholeness of the journey. Christ did. Think about Christ's journey. He was led to the top of a mountain in which he was literally transfigured and experienced the fullness of his Father's glory. And yet he also descended below all things in the Garden of Gethsemane and on the cross. All of it was part of his life. You know, there are so many hard things going on in the lives of so many of my friends and relatives right now. I have a good friend who has a serious form of breast cancer. I have two male friends in the last year and a half that have both passed away from ALS. Yesterday, the wife of one of those men, I spent 2 hours on the phone with the wife of one of those men who told me that she had just been diagnosed from her neurologist with ALS. She said, Roger, what are the chances that could happen? She looked it up. 1 in 100 million. 1 in 100 million. She said, I don't know for sure. I am going to wait and see what happens. My sister has chronic back pain. A friend just recently lost his job. I have friends who lost a son to, suicide just a couple of years ago. I just learned not too recently about a year ago, in fact, that I have neuroendocrine pancreatic cancer. Unfortunately, it's not the aggressive pancreatic cancer, but it's cancer. Some things we can change, and it makes sense to create a vision, to accept responsibility and influence as much of life as we can. But there are things in life that we cannot. We're at life's mercy. Meeting life with grace is celebrating the beauty and wonderful things about life, but it's also grieving the gap between what is and our hopes and expectations. Because for all of us, there is a difference between the ideal and the real. Serenity is being willing to live, accept the real, and let go of and relax into, what is instead of unrealistic expectations about the way my child has to be or my husband has to be or other people in my life have to be. I want to read a story to you. And this is actually, it's an essay written by, and some of you may be familiar with it. You may have heard of it. It's by Emily Pearl Kingsley about her experience raising a child with Down syndrome. Any of you read it? Okay, one of you. It's an essay that's been widely shared among parents of special needs children, but It's a message that I think applies to all of us and really helps us understand the meaning of serenity. When you're going to have a baby, it's like planning a fabulous vacation trip to Italy. You buy a bunch of, and by the way, that's where I was. I was in Italy, and I got a call from my doctor. And normally those calls don't come in. But anyway, I got a call from my gastroenterologist, and he told me that this was about, just over a year ago. I was in Italy vacationing, and he said, Roger, I can no longer continue to treat you. You need to see an oncologist. You have two tumors within your pancreas. Oh, well, thanks, doctor. $67 phone call, by the way. But it was shocking. It was shocking news. So you're planning a trip to Italy and you buy a bunch of guidebooks and you make your wonderful plans. The Colosseum, the Michelangelo, David, the gondolas in Venice. You may learn some handy phrases in Italian. It's all very exciting. After months of eager anticipation, the day finally arrives. You pack your bags and off you go. Several hours later, the plane lands. The stewardess comes on and says, Welcome to Holland. Holland, you say? What do you mean, Holland? I signed up for Italy. I'm supposed to be in Italy. All my life, I have dreamed of going to Italy. But there's been a change in your flight plan. They've landed in Holland, and there you must stay. The important thing is that they haven't taken you to a horrible, disgusting, filthy place full of pestilence, famine, and disease. It's just a different place. So you must go out and buy new guidebooks. You must learn a whole new language, and you'll meet a whole new group of people who you would never have met. It's just a different place. It's a slower pace than Italy, less flashy than Italy. But after you've been there for a while and you catch your breath, you look around and you begin to notice that Holland has windmills and Holland has tulips. Holland even has Rembrandts. But everybody that you know is coming and going from Italy, and they're all bragging about a wonderful time they had there. And for the rest of your life, you will say, yes, that's where I was supposed to go. That's what I had planned. And that pain will never, ever, ever go away because the loss of that dream is a significant loss. But if you spend your life mourning the fact that you didn't get to go to Italy, you may never enjoy the very special, the very lovely things about Holland. So how can you identify with this message? What twists and turns has your life taken that you did not anticipate? Most of us need not search very hard to recognize unfulfilled dreams, disillusionment, perhaps with institutions or people that you once counted on, unplanned relationship breakdowns, ways in which life has been unfair, even cruel. And furthermore, it is so easy to get lost in the bitterness of unfulfilled hopes that we never get to experience, Italy, but we fail to experience the wonders and the beauty and the truth and the goodness of Holland. Well, serenity is about meeting life with grace. And it doesn't mean, when I'm in serenity, that still success is available to me. And doggone it, if there aren't times when I'm going to put on my success hat and I'm going to go for it and I'm going to make things happen and I'm going to take life by the horns, bull by the horns. Do you know what I'm saying? And there are times when I'm going to live from security and conformity and go along, even if I think, that there's a different way, but I recognize that I'm part of a group right now that I need to fit in and I need to conform and I'm going to. And there are even going to be times when I'm coming from survival and I'm reactive. It's all available to me, but I'm going to recognize quickly what's happening. I'm going to take responsibility. I'm going to recognize that I have different choices and start exercising those choices and pull myself again back up into serenity. Life is governed by grace. I'm conscious, I'm present, I'm paying attention to what's happening instead of just being on automatic pilot. I accept life on its terms. I recognize that I choose even the hard things. I choose to have pancreatic cancer because if I can say I choose to have cancer, it makes facing that cancer a lot easier than when I say, you know, this is something life dealt with me. I will make the best I can of what life has dealt. I'm 100% responsible for myself. My beliefs are trust-based. I'm okay, even though I'm flawed. I am okay. Fundamentally, at a deep level, I value myself, even when I blow it, even though when I see my clay feet and I embarrass myself or I whatever, I'm okay. I don't have to be perfect in order to know that I'm okay because I meet myself with grace. People are good. We're in this together. Part of what happens is it's not just about me, but it is about us. It is about showing up for other people and seeing other people more deeply. Another core belief is my experience equals my beliefs. I'm interdependent. All people have worth. I'm more trusting and accepting. I'm more real and vulnerable. I can let people see my clay feet. I can let people see how imperfect I am. In our negotiations, I seek win-win for the good of all. I tend to become more generous and giving. So those are some of the characteristics. I want to share a story. I'm looking at the time, and we may need to. This was a friend of our family, and her name was Fern. And Fern was a school teacher. In fact, my sister did her student teaching with her, a high school teacher. And sadly, she developed cancer of the palate. And although she had her palate removed, the cancer gradually spread to her whole face and eventually throughout her body. And the doctors told her she had about 6 months to live. Well, she lived about 7 years, 7 years longer than they had predicted, out of will, out of a sense of purpose and desire. Well, she was a successful teacher and her students loved her. And at the beginning of every new quarter, she would sit on her desk in front of her students. And by the way, her face was ugly because her cheekbones had collapsed. She had no cheekbones. And she would sit on the front of her desk and she would say, I want you to look at my face and I want you to tell me how you feel about it. And then I'd like to tell you how I feel about it. She would express to them her feelings about her face and her acceptance of her cancer and encourage her class to express their feelings as well. Well, Fern is an example of serenity because of the way she responded to her illness. She faced it. She grieved. Certainly, there was probably a time when she was mad at God, but she faced it. She refused to let it define her, even though it left her face scarred and deformed. And her acceptance and transparency helped her students not only accept her, but learn something about life and their ability to respond to life courageously and in a generous way. She made positive choices about her cancer that not only blessed her family and herself, but touched many students and work associates as well. That's kind of a dramatic example, you know? We're not all going to face something quite as dramatic as Fern, but we all have those hardships. Serenity is about opening our arms and letting life be what it is. Let me pause for some questions because then we haven't even gotten to the second page.
I have
Anybody?
a I have a quick question. Okay,
Yes.
so as you were explaining these different stages, the thought that came to my mind is how I need to maybe repent a little bit about well, the first thing that I thought is when you said open your arms, I was I thought about the Savior. Here am I, send me, that's and how we do need to feel those things that we're okay and we don't need to be liked and we need to not have to be successful to be in that place like Christ was in. And the second thought that came to my mind was when my children are in the stage of, like you had said, being dogmatic, being, I tend to get on that or jump on that bandwagon with them,
Yeah.
and how I don't need to do that. I can just
Yeah.
love them, and that they're actually in an important stage.
Yeah.
And it's important for me to live in that truth that they're just working through these stages, and they're going to go through that dogmatic stage. They're going to go through that pendulum where they're completely independent,
Yeah.
and I don't need you, and me to be okay that they don't need me.
Yeah. Ooh, such a good comment. And isn't it so important to realize I don't have to fix anybody? You know, yeah, I love your insight that you can let your children be where they are, even if you don't particularly like where they are. You can let them know that this is their journey.
And it's a developmental stage that is okay,
Yes,
that they're actually going from a
yes,
lower stage by getting in that stage.
exactly, exactly. Yeah. So you can see kind of their process in a little bit different way. Yeah, good. No, I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Nobody else has their hands up, so should we move on? Thanks, Tamara.
I've either done a good job or a very poor job.
You've done an amazing job.
Let me give you another story. After her husband died, Ruth's world went quiet. She had loved him deeply and grieved him deeply. And for many months, she felt like she moved through life underwater. But slowly, through prayer, journaling, and walks at sunrise, she found herself softening toward life rather than resisting it. She began to see beauty everywhere: light on dishes in the sink, grandkids' scribbles on the fridge, the neighbor boy's awkward waves, the way grief deepened her compassion. She found she could hold joy and sorrow in the same breath. Her life had not turned out the way she imagined. There were still unfulfilled dreams, losses she hadn't chosen, disappointments that stung. But she no longer treated those as intruders. They were part of the landscape of a whole life. One morning she sat in prayer and whispered, "Thank you for all of it." Not because all of it was good, but because all of it shaped her into someone she trusted, someone God trusted too. She welcomed people as they were. She welcomed life as it was. She welcomed herself, imperfect and beloved. Ruth had come to a place where her arms were open, not clenched in fear, not grasping for control, not performing for approval, not striving to prove anything. Open. She met life with grace. And in that openness, she felt God everywhere, in the silence, in the grief, in the laughter, in the ordinary holiness of her days. There was serenity, befriending life as it is and trusting God with what it isn't. Let me have you turn over, because the purpose, I call this pathway to serenity and love, and we don't have a lot of time here. But pathway to serenity and love, notice when a circumstance occurs, we can move one of two directions. We can move, a circumstance, a hard circumstance occurs in my life, or an event occurs in my life. I can be unconscious. That means I have very little awareness, right? This comes back to the 5 principles that I talked about at the very beginning, how we grow. Unconscious, I resist reality, I disown responsibility, I'm tossed to and fro by circumstances, and I react to life from fear. That's one path we can step onto, and that path moves us downward through the stages toward survival, toward fear. Or I can be present. Being present means I pay attention to what's happening. I'm alert. I'm awake. I can embrace reality. I can own my responsibility. I can clarify my vision, and I can act rather than react. And I can act from love. Well, I believe as circumstances happen, these steps are a way for us to grow through the stages. Back to the question Tammy asked earlier, and that is, how do I grow? How do I grow into this? Is the way we grow by being present. And notice being present. There are many different practices that I've listed here. Be still and know that I am God. Quiet ourselves, practice mindfulness, slow down. That's actually been my mantra this year. Slow down, savor the small pleasures. All of that is part of being present. Embrace reality, relax, let go. When key moments happen or when hard things happen, what I tell people to do is notice, relax your jaw, relax your shoulders, literally relax your hands at that moment. Relax and let go of what is happening. Relax and let go. Not my will, but thine is part of embracing reality. Practice gratitude, choose abundance over scarcity. Well, I think we're out of time. I don't have own responsibility. Practice emotional self-regulation. Challenge your story, your thoughts. Let go of blame and self-justification. Be proactive. Clarify your vision. Clarify what is your purpose? What are your values? What is it that you want to happen in your life? Knowing that again, we're limited. But what is your vision for yourself? Be intentional day by day. I begin my days with meditation and then I go to I choose. I choose. And the I choose is not a list of to-dos. The I choose is this is where I want to come from. I choose grace. I choose love. I choose confidence. I choose whatever it might be. This is how I want to experience this day, and so on. Act from love, act from kindness. Smile lots. Smile lots. Cultivate friendships, change your attributions. Anyway, that's a pathway. And that's a pathway not just from success. I mean, certainly this is a pathway from success into serenity, but this is the pathway through all of these stages of growth. So I appreciate this time being with you. So thank you all, Stephanie.
Roger, I don't know if you've seen the comments, but so many people have just been saying what a blessing and what a gift this has been to hear this from you today. And I know that I speak, this is exactly how I feel when I hear him speak at Education Week. It makes things so clear and tangible for me. And I just really appreciate what you've shared with us. I wanted to point out something that stood out to me on this is the serenity. If you take just the first part of that word, seren, if you add onto the end der, surrender, right? And
Ooh,
that's
yeah.
what, right? So it's the same root word as what we learned in our class. And for those of you who aren't familiar with our class, we do a 12-step program for codependency. The first step is I can't. The second one is God can. And the third is I will let him. And that's the surrender step.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
those three steps I repeat throughout the day whenever things come up. But that's the path to peace. That's the path to serenity is the path of surrender.
Yeah.
So I love it so much. There's so many things, so many notes that I took. I want to let everybody on the class know that we've recorded this today. And if any of you are not on my email distribution, you can either drop your email in the chat or email me at healingthroughchristclass@gmail.com. And I will send you the recording here. And if you should have already received the documents that Roger sent out. If not, you can respond back and I'll send those to you. And I actually have the story that you shared about the trip to Holland. And so I think I'm going to share that with my class every time
Right.
I just and I heard it in your class at Education Week and I asked you for a copy of it. But every time I hear that, it just gosh, we can all identify with that message wherever we're at. And the path of recovery is the path of being able to surrender to where we're at and find the joy and the blessings of the place that we're at, even if it's not where we expect it to be. So I'll send that out as well. Um, we're going to go ahead and close with a closing prayer. And then I just want to invite, yes.
Well, if I could just say, because I've just been noticing a couple of the comments, and
Yeah.
I don't have a podcast. My webpage you have, www, it's on your handout actually.
Yes.
I do have a ton of materials, including online courses as well as books. I probably shouldn't say this, but and
Oh, this
I'm
is great.
coming out with a marriage book very soon.
Oh, awesome. So
Yeah.
I will let you know, I've been on his website. So first of all, he has a free YouTube channel, but his website, the courses are so affordable. I mean, I do a lot of self-help and I've never seen such great content at such a low price. And I know that your purpose in doing that is to get into it as many hands as you can. So I will send again your website when I send out the recording with this and also your YouTube channel. And I actually subscribe to your emails. So
Oh, okay.
I love getting your emails too. So there's a lot of resources for you, and I'll send those out in this. And is there anything else that I've missed there, Roger?
I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, this was so fantastic. We're going to go ahead and have a closing prayer from Tamara, and then what we typically do is I'll turn off the recording, and then I stay on. And Roger, if people have questions and if you'd like to stay on, then we can stay on with Roger.
Tell me which is better. Would you prefer I stay on or leave?
I would love for you to stay on. I would
Okay.
love for you to
Okay.
stay on.
Sure. I can do that.
It just gives a little space for people when we're not recording to be able to come forward with some more vulnerable questions that they might have. And if nobody has a question, that's fine too, but I always give the option. So we'll turn the time over to Tamara and we'll end the recording after her prayer.
Dear kindly Heavenly Father, we are so grateful for this time that we've been able to spend together and hear these truths. We are grateful for the opportunities that we have been presented, and please help us to have thy spirit with us to guide us and direct us so that we can do thy will, that we can progress and we can weed out those things that bring misery and unhappiness. We are so grateful for each other and that we have each other to learn and grow from, and all the people in our lives that help us to learn and grow to become more like thee. And we say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
And thank you, Tamara. I'm going to go ahead and end this recording. Hold on.